26 to 28, right? In the TORS training manual?
Yes, it is in the training manual anyway, but you know, it's basically, just think about your GST, the GST paid and the GST collected. Which one is bigger? Say, for example, you know, the GST that will be refunded to you is only when the GST paid is bigger than your GST collected.
Yes.
Yeah. And you see there, and those are the journals. Again, I will email that. The next case is when the GST is deducted from your CMF account. And that is the case when the GST paid is less than the GST collected.
Right.
And the difference is the entry on the CMF statement.
Thank you.
Yeah. Is that clear? Yeah. Sure. Again, you know, there'll be a questions at the end, questions section.
Like if I hadn't been doing this, what's happened?
The next section, yeah.
Just a comment.
Yes.
I find it better to actually do that journal entry after you've received the CMF statement and reconciled it, and then go back and fix it up then, because on occasion,
yes,
what you might have put through as on the GST, the conference will find an invoice there that doesn't meet the requirements and therefore won't pay the GST. So instead of going back and fixing up with another journal entry, it's probably better to do it.
So it is, yeah, so it is recommended that you do this journal once you receive your CMF statement, correct?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right, because that's essentially how much we were able to refund you or deduct you from your CMF. Yeah, so we need to scrutinize the supporting documents. There are GST guidelines from the tax office that we need to meet.
When it comes from the statement, you do it then?
Yes. Yep, that's correct, Doug.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's why, and sometimes you will find occasions where, you know, you're saying, okay, $50 is the GST that I'm claiming. That's on your GST report. But we come back and say, and have a look at the supporting documents. Hang on, there is a GST for say $20 that supporting document does not meet the requirements for GST. So then we usually email you back and say, look, we are only refunding you $30. $20 will be, you need to allocate it to the expense account. And usually, I didn't cover that here. Probably, I thought it would be too complicated to mix up the debits and the credits in just one afternoon. But we usually email, when we email you back, we say, okay, you debit this, credit that, and so on. So that's what we usually do when we are not paying, refunding you what you are claiming. That's usually the case. But essentially, in principle, this will be, you know, the GST journals when it is refunded and when it is deducted from your CMF account. We will move on. Bank reconciliation. Basically, a bank reconciliation is a check that compares the cash ledger amounts with the amounts shown on the bank statement, on the CMF statement, or on the Westpac statement. Any differences, any amounts that do not appear on either side, either the ledger or either the statement, then we need to investigate, justify, correct. And because the you know, cash is a very risky asset, that's why we need to do this bank reconciliation every month. And it is part of one of the steps in order for you to close a month. So that's what it is. That's what a bank reconciliation is. And this is a screenshot of what TORs look like. And you know, when you create a new bank reconciliation, you need to put the statement date, and this comes from the Treasury, the TORs training manual. It says that the last day of the month needs to be put on the statement date, regardless of the date of the last transaction of the bank statement. So that's what's recommended. And then obviously on the bank statement box, you need to put the closing balance of the bank statement. And once you do that, it will show you under the variance box, it will show you a difference, which will be reduced to 0 once you start doing all your bank reconciliation and you finish that task. So and essentially the task is you need to match or tick on the bank reconciliation module in Tools and highlight in the bank statement when you see both amounts, each and every transaction. So transactions that are not highlighted on the bank statement at the end of once you do your check, then those amounts need to be justified or journaled. Sometimes there are interest income that come in or interest expenses. Sometimes when you have overdrawn your account for a couple of days, there is a bit of an expense there. So let's and at the end, the aim is to achieve a variance of 0 before you can continue. And again, there are journals that need to be done for that to happen, for that variance to be 0, such as GST refunds or GST payments. We have already seen that before, and interest income, or income not yet received, etc. Let's have a look at some examples. That the typical amounts that appear on the bank statement and are not in the system yet in Tools are interest income, for example. And what you do is, cash, the CMF account is increasing, so a debit to cash management facility. Every time the cash account increases in Tools, you need to debit it. And what is the other side of the story? Credit to interest income account, or sometimes some churches just use local budget. There are also interest charges sometimes that come in, they pop up on the bank statement. And you go, in that case, you debit interest expense or local budget and credit cash management facility. In that case, like I said before, if the asset account increases, then you debit it. If the asset account, cash account reduces, then you need to credit. So the opposite. Those are the debits and credits for interest income and interest charges. Is there any questions? No?
No.
Next slide. Double entries. Sometimes this is very typical when we find that by mistake we have doubled journal an expense. And what you do in that case is you need to obviously reverse that. And what you do is you need to find out the original expense account that was used for the first entry. Let's say, I don't know, a reimbursement to someone, then obviously, especially if the payment hasn't actually, if cash hasn't really been deducted from your CMF statement, it was just once, but somehow in the system, it was recorded the expense twice. So all you do is you reverse it. So you debit cash management facility, because if you think about it, there are two amounts in the credit side for cash management facility. So one of them will have to be debited, and you will credit the relevant expense account that was used for the very first entry. So it just needs to be reversed, that's all. But if, for example, there are situations where cash was actually paid twice, in that case, this is still the same journal, but you will need to get the money back, obviously, from whoever got paid twice. So this is a very typical situation where we see this often in bank reconciliations for our churches. Is there any questions so far?
No.
I will pass it on to Keaton now. He said that there is something that we need to correct. Which one is that, Keaton?
We're just missing a word.
Where are we missing?
Right.
process by
Step
which.
1, insure period is closed. It should say insure period is not closed.
All right. Let me just show that on the big screen. There you go. All yours, Keaton.
Okay, so we're going to talk now about the end of year processing. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. So this is the process by which we are going to clear out all of our temporary accounts. So those are accounts that we just want to show the current year's worth of stuff. So that's all our income and expense accounts. Because once we close off a year and we're looking at the following year, we don't really want to see income and expenses from last year still in our reports. We want that to be cleared out so that we can start fresh at the beginning of a new year. So to do that, essentially we need to get right to the point where we usually close the period. So that is, we enter all our income, all our expenses, we complete our bank rec, we do any GST journals and interest journals, all these things that we've talked about so far. We get right to that point where we need to click the button to close the period. And then instead of doing that, we go and print a funds report. And then that funds report will show us the total income and the total expense for all our income and expense accounts for that particular year. And the income amounts should all appear on that funds report as credits, and the expense account amounts should all appear as debits. And to clear them out, we need to go and do a journal where we debit all the income accounts and credit all the expense accounts. So the amount that we debit and credit will be straight off that funds report that we've printed. So at the end of the year, if your income account had $100 of credit in it and you need to clear that back to zero, then your journal will do a $100 debit. Once you've done the debits and credits to clear the income and expense accounts, whatever's left over to balance your journal will go either to the fund parent account for that particular fund. So if you'll say clearing evangelism income and evangelism expense, you might want to clear them back to the evangelism fund, or alternatively, you might want to clear everything back to the local budget fund. So it's up to you and your church how you want to do it. Some funds may be able to retain what they didn't spend from a previous year, whereas other particular funds might not. So for example, Pathfinders, a lot of Pathfinder funds don't tend to clear back to the local budget because they have an ongoing setup, whereas maybe the deacons budget, they don't get to spend unspent money from last year. They just get a fresh budget at the beginning of the year. Those are just examples. It's completely up to you and your church how you do it. Yeah, we'll go on to the next slide, Paolo. Great. Okay, so this is an example of that journal that we've been talking about. So you can see here, the local budget fund has 15,000 in it. Now, the balance in the fund is kind of what's, that's your sort of prior year equity is what's sitting in there. Then the local budget income is 40,000. So that's sort of representing what was collected into local budget for the current year. And then local budget disbursements, 30,000. So that's kind of your spending for that year. And so the total of the fund you can see is 25,000 because you've got the 15,000 of prior year income plus 40,000 of current year income, and then less 30,000 of current year expenditure. And then our operating fund, you can see it's got sort of a whole bunch of figures there for our expenses and for our income. And there's a total of that fund as well. And then we've also got a building fund. So essentially to clear all of these out at the end of the year, local budget income, we would need to do a debit to that account, and the debit amount would have to be 40,000. So that would clear that one back to zero. We'd also need to do a $30,000 credit to local budget disbursements. which would leave $10,000 to balance that particular journal, and that would go against the local budget fund. And then what that would look like at the end, after you'd posted that journal, would be at the very top, the fund would have 25,000 in it, and then the income and the expense would both have 0. The total at the bottom is still unchanged. It would still be 25,000. But essentially that's setting you up. So at the beginning of the next year, you're now saying 25,000 is my prior year equity. And then I'm starting fresh at 0 income, 0 expenses, and then we can go throughout the year.
So you're saying that always the fund accounts never clear off in a year, right?
Yeah, the fund will be essentially what is representing prior year equity. Now, as I said before, a church may decide that certain funds don't get to access their prior year equity. Just because the deacons fund didn't spend all of their money doesn't mean they get to spend whatever was left over plus the next year's budget. That may roll back to the local budget fund. So in some cases, the fund account itself would also clear to 0.
And again, this example is on the TORS manual, TORS user manual, which I think I might have emailed to you sometime last week. I think, yeah, just have a look in that section there, end of year processing. It's only in
Page 33.
yeah, page 33. There you go.
Actually, this church operating fund is a good example of one where you wouldn't roll over last year's budget. And you can see there as well, the beginning value of the fund is 0. So there's no prior year equity in there to begin with. The operating income was 10,000. So that's what was budgeted for church operating. And then you can see how it was spent. There was 900 spent on cleaning, electricity, 4,100, and so on, to the point where it was actually overspent by $350. So there was actually $350 more spending in that fund than there was budget given to it.
Yeah.
And that shouldn't affect them for the following year, just because you overspent $350 on cleaning, electricity rates, and insurance, those kind of things. You can't expect to make that up in the next year because those things are fairly static. So that loss needs to be felt in the local budget income instead.
Yes. So this needs to happen once we finish the year. Say some churches end, in June. Other churches end in December.
Some even end in January.
Even in January, yes. Yeah. So I have, I think last week I've done this for my McLean Church, right, Pam?
Yes, that's right.
So that's what we did for your church in that week. So McLean Church financial year ends in June. So what we did was I asked her whether she has done all the bank reconciliations. Yeah, and essentially the bank reconciliations were all completed. All income, all expenses submitted or recorded in TORS. I didn't see any abnormal or double entries on the bank reconciliation, so everything was nice and clean. And so the next step was really to do this journal, which so it was a good exercise. So
and after we complete this journal, you can check to see if it worked by going and printing another funds report.
Exactly.
And on that funds report, you should see zeros in all the income and expense accounts.
And that is very important actually, because if we go back to the previous slide, it says that ensure the period is not closed. And then we need to print the funds report because it's a picture of what the accounts look like just before you do this journal, because after you do this journal, you just zero out all the income and expenses account against the funds account. So that's why it's
after that,
very
you won't
important.
be able to see what happened in that year. So yeah, it's important to print that. And then, once you've done that journal, then you'll be ready to close. And at the beginning of the next year is when you can put your budget journal in, which I think, I won't be talking about that, but that'll be our next section, I think. Budgeting.
Yes. So the next section is actually, I think I put a little slide there for end of year processing for spreadsheet churches.
Yes.
So some churches obviously are not on tours. Some use this Excel file which we send them every year. Essentially, this is what that is. So I think you guys don't need to worry about if any of you use still Excel for your accounting.
I think John does.
John
from
does, yeah.
Moorhope.
Yes. What is the story there, Maxine? I think you have dealt with these churches more often than me.
Yep, sure. Yeah, for the end of year processing, we a new spreadsheet will be sent out, and the treasurers just transfer the closing balances from the previous year to the January tab and go from there. So it's a fairly simple process.
Mm.
Yep.
Yes. So that's what we have on the end of year processing, Keaton. So the next section we will be covering on budgeting. And I will pass it on to Owen. He's going to talk about the principles of budgeting and what other very useful information to keep in mind for when doing this very important part of your treasury role. Back to you, Owen.
Well, thanks, Paolo. Do we all, I guess when it comes to budgeting, do we all set a budget at your local churches?
Yep.
Yeah, that's good.
I do. Yep.
Yeah, because that's
we do.
oh, very good. That's fantastic. Because it's very important because it gives you like a benchmark for tracking your income and your expenditure. It also gives you a sort of an idea of where your funding's coming from, and it'll also give authorization to your different departments, church departments on their expenditure as well, because it's yeah. Because once you run your budget through either your business meeting or your board for approval, that's kind of like you set the approval process for the year, for the 12 months. Could we move on to the next slide, please, Paul? So I think a lot of there's different ways of budgeting. Sometimes you can look at the previous year's budget and sort of gauge how much is in there, like based on the what's been spent on the previous year's budget. But I usually favor sort of starting from a zero base, where you sort of start from, you just sort of go back and talk to all your departments, have a look at what expenditures that you're going to be getting, like your insurance, your electricity, and all of that, and then sort of map it out. Have we got that slide, that next slide over, Paulo? Is that the keep going? Next one. So yeah, so when you just go back. So what I've the next one back. Wait, go back one. Yep, that's the one. That table there.
You want the table you want, or
Get a table.
there you go.
So what I usually find would help with a budget is laying out the 12 months of the year. And so this is just a mock budget that I've put together, which sort of looks at your income. And so if some of you might rent out your facilities, so you would get that extra income, which will probably, you can classify that as a fixed income, because you would know that money is going to come in each month. And then you'll have your local budget income, which is dependent on on the offering each Sabbath. So what I usually do with that one is you can have a look at what's sort of been coming in on each month and do an average. So I've sort of straight lined the budget income here for this purpose, but by looking at your historics, you can then set your income depending on each month. So you can say for January, you'd probably be receiving $1,000 on average each January, and February you might receive 500. So by looking at the history of it, you can then plot in the income amounts there on the top on the top there, and that'll then give you an idea of how much income you have each month to spend. And then on the bottom of that chart there, you then have all your different expenditures that you will be needing to run the church. So like your electricity will come in on a quarterly basis. So every 3 months you would have your electricity. So you look at which month you generally would receive your electricity bill. And so if it's February, and usually in February the electricity is a lot lower because you're not using too much heating. So that's on average about $400 to $400. You put $400 there. In May, 700. So it just depends on what your average usage is. And then as you're going along, if you're talking to, plot all of those in, talk to your ministries, and then set a budget for them. And then that way you then sort of get an idea of how much, based on your income, how much of your expenditure is covered by your regular income each month. And then you'll then have a line down the bottom there which has your surplus deficits. And as you can see, according to this budget, some months you might not get enough in your local budget income to cover your big expenses. So like in July, you would get your insurance bill, which is for your buildings and that. So sometimes you might go into a massive deficit. But if at the end, what you're trying to work towards is that by the end of the year, that your cumulatively surplus deficits, you'll be able to balance that budget for the whole year. Because if, so in this one here, we've got a deficit of $320 in this budget, and that means you're borrowing from funds that you have received in previous years, and eating into into your cash equity that you put aside. Yeah, so it is an important part of sort of our local church accounting that we set a budget, and we can send you out this template that we've sort of had, and if you want, just contact Paolo or Maxine, and then we'll email you out a template spreadsheet that you can use for your budgeting.
Next slide.
So I just thought I'll also put in a little bit here on the impacts of the coronavirus, since because that's sort of budgeting, sort of looking at a normal year when we're all been operating as per normal, and each Sabbath we're able to take up an offering that's going to cover the costs of the running of the church. At this stage, we're not sure with the corona how long it's going to go for, and whether, for some churches we haven't even reopened. So it's probably a good idea to sit down and relook at all your expenditures and the income that you'll be getting going forward. So what you might want to look at is like at the moment with interest, the banks aren't giving us much interest at the moment, with the central bank interest being at all-time lows of, I think it's 0.25% at the moment. CMF is only offering I think just under 1%. So you might want to look at reducing your income that you're getting from the interest in the bank. With your local budgets, with some churches still not opening, you aren't able to take up a collection each Sabbath, so you might look at reducing that. With a sort of e-giving has sort of taken off a bit with churches not opening, so we'll probably factor in that your e-giving is probably going to increase. Well, I'm looking at overall numbers there of 10 to 15%, but it's probably more depending on each local church and the conversion that you're able to get your members to use e-giving. With cash and envelopes reducing quite significantly. Some churches which have hire up their facilities, you probably can't do that at the moment. So there's another sort of 100% reduction in your funding from there. What you might also consider is tapping into the evangelism budget for funding of online programs and all that as a different source of funding for you. So yeah, so that's sort of just sort of highlighting some of the impacts there on the on your income from the coronavirus. If you could switch over to the next one, please, Paolo.
Yes.
And then also looking at your expenditure as well. So most of you would probably be running a live stream churches and that, so you probably want to still maintain that or either acquire more equipment to sort of facilitate that. Your cleaning, depending on whether your churches are open, you might eliminate all your cleaning expenditure. If you're employing any staff at the local church, you might still consider reducing that. Well, with some of you might have tapped into the JobKeeper program that is looking like it's gonna run out come September. So depending on whether the church is open, you might then decide to reduce that staffing that you're employing. Yeah, so maintain your copyrights, because your CCLI licenses and all that, because that's quite important at the moment to keep live stream going. And yeah, so your electricity, your gas, yeah, that'll all just depend on how often you're using your facilities. Your insurance is still important to maintain that. And then all your other essential services are probably reduced. So you probably look at reducing all of that one. Defer any non-essential building maintenance and any capital works that you're looking to put in. You might defer any new stages and complete what you've got going at the moment. So yeah, it's some of the items you might want to consider with adjusting your budgets for the next 6 months and maybe even beyond, depending on how long these shutdowns will go for. All right. I think there any questions? Cool.
There is. All right, let's go to the next slide then. There are other topics that we'll cover as well. It will be a discussion, essentially. There is a new accounting system coming up, right, Owen? It's going to be called Sage.
Yes.
It's called Sage.
So the tithe and offering system that we're currently using is kind of reaching the end of its useful life, and we're looking at transitioning over to a new system called Sage. So at this stage, we going to do the first rollout here at the conference, starting from August this year, and looking at a full rollout to all the churches from February, March next year. So at this stage, once we get a lot of the planning and scoping done for that, we'll look at running sort of online training to start with, just to sort of get you all familiar with the new system. And then we'll also run out church by church setups and training, so that's more personalized. So we'll have people coming out and meeting with you on site, and to import your data and to help you along with getting you familiar with the new system.
So this new system, what is based? I mean, I guess what's the difference between the new system and the TORs, the currently system we have, TORs? I guess more user friendly or faster processing, or?
Yeah, so the new system is going to be a cloud-based system. So the current TOR system has been written specifically to be used on Internet Explorer, and Internet Explorer is kind of on its way out as well. So yeah, so the new system is kind of an off-the-shelf accounting system that that the division has sort of looked at, and it looks like it's going to be a good replacement. So there'll be a few changes with how things are done. Like currently, with most of you will probably be doing your payments through CMF, because there's TORs was written specifically to have that integration with CMF. The new system probably won't have that, and so there'll be a few slight changes with our payment files sort of set up and all that. So yeah.
Does anybody have any questions on regarding the new accounting system we'll be using next year?
Paul here. My understanding was that with current transactions that the conference puts on our K-Church statements that then have to be entered manually by us, that will all happen automatically. Like the conference transactions will go automatically into our own local church accounting. Is that correct?
That's what we're planning on, Paul. It's that a lot of, like, if you have employees at the local church, that once the payroll is processed from the conference side, it'll push all of those transactions into each ledger, and you won't have to process that. That'll be automatically done.
Obviously, yeah, make that a lot more efficient.
Yes.
Also, there is efficiencies, potential efficiencies to be gained there with the new system, correct? Very good. Yes?
Just on that, if that's the case, will we get notification that those expenses have been applied anyway? Because at the moment, because we're entering them manually, we're aware of them. We're able to report on them, but to our church. But if they're done automatically, they might be missed in the whole scheme of things. So just bear that in mind when that's implemented.
Yeah, you'd still, thanks Bruce, you'd still be receiving sort of a notification on those expenditures that are going to be processed. So it'd be your wages, your insurance, stuff like that, that's sort of processed from here. So.
And they will still appear on, it will be interesting to find out how, whether the K-chart statements or my statements, we'll talk about that in the next couple of minutes, but it'll be interesting to find out how my statements will work with this new system.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
there might be.
Direct debits. We have our electricity and natural gas direct debited. How will we go with that on the new system?
Yes, so that'll we'll talk about we're going to talk about the procurement survey coming up as well.
Okay.
Because with the procurement survey, we're looking at sort of having one account that would manage all our electricity for all the properties across the conference.
Okay.
We have just completed we did a sort of we tested out the market on all the conference properties that we have. Just here at the conference office up at Stewart's Point, the BBF and all that, and for to change over to a single provider, we were able to save about $11,000 per annum across all our current sites. So I'm hoping that we will be able to replicate those sort of savings across all our churches as well by moving on to a single account, and then we can bring our buying power to bear for and get cheaper rates for all our churches. So yeah, so that's that we're going to talk about the procurement survey. So you would have all received an email from Paolo and Maxine regarding the that procurement survey. I'm hoping that if you're interested, fill in that survey and send it through, and we'll look at sort of bringing our collective buying power.
So on that $11,000, what sort of percentage was that saving?
Keaton, how much would that be across the properties that we have?
I'll just look that figure up. I'll get back to you.
Yeah.
The other thing is that some churches have got, like we have solar power on ours.
Yes.
So will that, you would need to know that, wouldn't you?
Yes, because we have solar powers on our office as well.
So you should have, on the survey, we should note whether we have solar power or not. Maybe you have to send a message out.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll do that.
I've already put mine in. I didn't write that, but Maitland do have solar.
Okay.
Send them an email.
Probably send us another email, Hope, just to attach that information into your survey.
Okay.
So basically, that survey, there's a due date, 20th of July, tomorrow. So I sent that email on Friday, just to remind you all. We just want to collate all those surveys and start to, having a look at this little project, which has a potential of saving some dollars on your expenditure, electricity, gas, water. Well, water. There's only one, right? Electricity, So the other, utilities that we can get a better rate, other suppliers. So.
Not so much water, because water is the a local council.
It just came out of my mouth. Everything except water. Or usually electricity is a big one. Gas. So that due date for the survey is tomorrow. So if you could please email us. Some of you guys have already emailed, so I appreciate that. We will collect those and start the research on that.
Sounds good.
Yes. Is there any questions regarding the first point, which is the new accounting system that will be implementing the next
I'm keen to be high on the list to start it.
Oh, good. You
Good.
want to be one of the
Yeah.
guinea pigs. Very good.
Yes, please.
I have
Actually-
a question about your procurement survey that you're
Yes,
talking
yes.
about.
Procurement, yes.
I am somewhat dismayed to actually receive that request because you've got a database that we write all that information into all the time. Can't you just run a query against the database and pull all that information out? I'm kind of astonished if you say no.
Anything is possible. Anything is possible, but it's just time consuming, Lee. Because the problem with Tors is it is very slow, like in
This is why
generating
we're swapping
report.
to a new system.
Yeah, which is why we're touching on the first point, Sage. But well, we just thought, you know, since you all have the actual bills, and you understand more your what you're spending on and your major items of expenditure, then that's why we emailed to you all.
Okay.
Yeah.
A question on Sage,
Yes.
and just out of interest, what's the back end? Nobody else is going to pay any attention. Can somebody answer that for me? What's the database that sits behind that?
So Sage is that's a technical question, Lee.
Yep. XIT, sorry.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I haven't got that off the top of my head, but Sage has sort of been around for a while, and they've also been using like micropay as well for their payroll. But I can look that up what their back end is.
Yeah, no, don't disrupt the meeting for that. You can let me know.
But I'm sure once. Sorry, I was just going to say that I'm sure once we have more, we are more into the project in the next few months, we'll have a better understanding and better view on, especially for churches, and obviously we'll have to run trainings, right? We'll do trainings. We'll have to for you all, but that's in the next. I'm guessing, I don't know, 6 to 10 months, maybe 12 months. So next year. So we're going to first trial it in, we'll start rolling over into for our accounting, the conferences accounting system. The current one that we use is SUN, S-U-N.
Yeah.
And so that is also changing to Sage. So we will be the first in learning the system. And then we'll get back to you all when we have more information and we're more technical on the use of Sage especially for tailored to churches. So, okay, the next point we just wanted to discuss the CMF. CMF is now, the statements are now online, so they are not longer sending paper copies of the statements. CMF. And the same as we already have the K-Chart statements online on the My Statements application for My Adventist. Essentially, if you have a My Adventist account, which if you have access to Tors, that means you have a My Adventist account, then simply you are able to access CMF. If you have been registered, obviously, with CMF, email us if you're not registered with CMF. But essentially, assuming that you have registered with CMF and you have a My Adventist account, then you can access CMF and your K-Chart statements online. Has everybody been able to see their CMF online since last June?
Yeah, we're fine.
Okay. Yep. Yes, and I know that there was a bit of anxiety in the date when they released that. CMF usually takes a bit of time in June, on the June statement and on the December one. I'm guessing they're wrapping up their their records there. I don't know, but they usually take a bit of time for when they release their statements. So that was the delay. So you know, and we were in the middle of just saying, yeah, to the treasurers, yeah, just a few more days, just a little bit more. But yeah, so it only happens in January, in the June, and in the December statements. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, so what you're saying, Paulo, with the K churches, that you're not going to be sending those out anymore?
Well, we haven't been sending those for the last, how long, Maxine? Like 4 months, 3 months?
Yeah, at least 3
When
months.
when we were struck with this virus and we were all sent home, so nobody was able to go to the office and prepare all those paper copy K-chart statements. So that's when we switched to my statements. And again, in my statements, it's just simply an application, same as CMF, same as stores, that you can find on the My Adventist website portal.
What about the K church invoices?
Yeah, so that's the only downside of that. That system, My Statements, does not allow us to attach the supporting documents for a charge, but what we have said was we can email you.
Yeah,
So
I've been emailed mine.
Sorry, Denise?
It was Lynn, and I've been emailed my church statements. On K Church,
yes.
Can I ask, when it starts to becoming taken out automatically, same with insurances and that, on our statement, will that appear as written as a K Church payment and insurance payment and not just grouped together with our tithes and offerings?
Yes. So that's at the rollover.
Because that previously payments have been done that, and you've got to sit there and work out what was tithes and offerings and what was a payment you put in, because it doesn't tally with what you've got written down.
Yes, good point.
So essentially what you're saying is the money that comes out of CMF statements, a big lump sum, it's just a lump sum, right? But the breakdown, so the breakdown is shown on the monthly report of TORS. And
but then when you're trying to tick off and match it with your bank statement, you've got to sit there and add up all the things that came out and check that they come to the bulk amount that's written on your statement.
That's right. It's very annoying, hey?
So I think if things are taken out of our account from K Church, it should be written on the statement as a deduction as a K Church.
The only thing that comes out of your statement is just simply the wages charges, nothing else. So the wages charges.
She's talking about end of month procedure.
Yes.
Yeah, it will always just be one transfer. It will always be a single amount transfer. Yeah, you can only look it up in the monthly report.
You look and you think this doesn't balance till you suddenly remember, oh, I had a payment I paid nearly 2 months ago because it's not been taken out yet. Because K Church is always a month behind when you paid it.
Yeah, sorry, Lynn. The only way to look that up is the monthly report. You just need to go back to the monthly report to because TORS is in such a way it only takes it as a single payment transfer. Yeah.
Will this change with Sage? Are we likely, if it's coming out, are we likely to have it that it is written as what is actually taken out for?
That's what we're hoping for, Lynn.
We can try, yeah.
Right, hopefully.
Well, this and other awkward processing issues is, it's all present in TORS. And, it's not only for your processing. We are, as a conference, when we try and compile all the months, it's also very awkward. Like, we spend time on compiling all the reports and just all the data transfer into our system. So it's just it's
It's
time consuming also for us. So, but I guess what we can say is with Sage will be the same system as for you churches and also for the conference accounting. So that can potentially have efficiencies gained there. So that's what I can say. Maxine or
I've
Keaton,
got that figure now.
Yeah.
Somebody was asking, I think it was Bruce.
Yep.
It's Doug.
Doug. Great. It was about a 15% saving, and the 11,000 was yeah.
That's a good saving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I guess Lynn wasn't that happy with our answer.
No, that's fine, but I'd just like to hopefully that we can work on that things are written down
Yeah.
as they are. It gets very confusing at times.
Yes.
And it's reasonable because you guys expect us to put in things line by line by line by line, donor by donor by donor. You don't expect us to go, oh well, we got $1,000 in the bag this week, and not attribute it to individuals. So it's pretty reasonable for you to provide us line by line billing from your end.
Yeah,
Yes?
absolutely. Yep, that's correct. So yeah, that's been a limitation with tours, and because they're all individual databases, it's something that we're looking to rectify moving forward. So yeah.
Yeah, it's something that's gone on too long, I would say.
That's why we're getting rid of it.
One of the reasons why we get rid of it. Yes.
I have a question, sorry, to just go back a little.
Yes.
With the K-Church statement, can you remind me how I find that again?
Sure.
I think I've only done it once and I now can't remember what I had to do.
Okay, so have you accessed your My Adventist portal? Yeah. Yes, once you are in, you will have two tabs there. One is, actually, I want to just show you there from my end, just 1 second. So let me see whether you can see my screen here. Hang on.
Yep.
Can you see that? I'm opening Internet Explorer. Can you see? Can you all see this?
Yep.
No, don't look at Trump. Don't worry about Trump. Okay, so all I'm doing is I'm going to myadventist.org portal, and it is the same login details as you use for tours.
Yeah.
In my case, some of you are registered with Google account or Yahoo, like Microsoft. I am registered as a staff member, so I have a staff account here. So I click on it, and that's my username. Well, my password is already saved on my computer. So you put your same login details for as you would for tours. So I log in, right?
Yep.
And log into my Adventist portal. Is everybody with me?
Yep.
Yeah, good. So this is what you see, right? You have recent tab applications, and also the other applications where when you're given all the applications available to you. In the recents, usually it's put on all the applications that you have used in history. Obviously, my statement is there because I have already accessed that. But if you can't see it, just come to applications. Yes, everybody with me?
Yeah.
Just in my applications, and you look for my statements. Here it is for me. By the way, you can also access e-giving from the My Adventist portal. Here it is, e-giving. But so I am choosing my statements, and basically we should have added your email address that you use for tours or My Adventist. We should have allocated that email onto your church's K-Church account. So you should see it as church current accounts. And obviously for me, it's another church, but which I won't access, but you should see like that. Can you see that, Hope? Do you see that on your?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
So in it, you can read. I will just basically go on. These are just examples. So you access on your K-Church, your K-Church statements. You can. The good thing about this is you can change the years. You can go back to even 2010 in the month, so the periods, and that's where you can see all the charges and so on.
Yep.
Or activities, any credits, any debits.
Hello, we did this a few months back, did we?
Yes, we did this.
Okay, so I
yeah.
can go back on my emails and double check that. Yep, okay.
Mm-hmm.
I remember doing it, but I'd completely forgotten all about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's and again, the only downside of this is that this system doesn't allow you to attach the supporting documents. But we said, okay, let us know which supporting documents you need, and we'll email you. The only for the wages, obviously, the wages charges. I guess the supporting document and your authorization for that is your the employees' documents for when they started, the payroll documents. So that's that will be the supporting document, and then all the charges that happen every fortnight for wages. So that's
yeah,
that's my statements.
Thank you.
What else can we talk about? Does anybody have any other questions so far? Because we have run out of slides.
Yes. With the end of year, I talked to Maxine last week, I think it was, just to refresh my memory. But I went through the reports, and there are 3 reports that you cannot do until end of month is completed. They are the monthly report, the GST report, and the offerings comparison report. Now, when it comes to end of year and you want to grab those reports and use them for the business meeting, the offerings comparison report is a very good one to show the folks, but it's absolute nonsense after end of year journal entries. The other 2, I've just used the income report rather than income statement rather than the monthly report as I normally would for the end of June. But particularly the offerings comparison report was a jolly nuisance not being able to utilise that one at the end of the year to show what this year compared to the previous financial year was like. So just a comment.
Bruce, I've got a little trick that you could do to get around that. You could close the period, get the reports you need, and then ask us to reopen it for you. We would need you to have it closed again by the 20th of the month, but if all you needed to do was that journal, then that would probably be something that might work.
Yeah.
But that'd be a lot of time. Yeah, I'm not sure it's worth chasing that just for the one report, though. I mean,
yeah, up to you. If you really wanted that report, then that would be a fix that would work. As we said, Sage is coming.
Yeah.
And this is the crazy system that we're in at the moment, where we can do things with little workarounds and that sort of thing. But yeah, that's probably the only thing I can think of that would give you the reports you want and still be able to do your end of year processing.
Mm.
I think I'd like to do it. Should we do it?
Do
All the expenditures.
Any questions on maybe GST, bank reconciliation?
Well, I just
yes.
sorry, just a question. For those of us that do have employees that are paid by the conference, my understanding is that during this JobKeeper period, that we don't do the journal entries in relation to the wages at the end of each month. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Right, Owen? I think we are waiting for until all these credits from the government run out, which will be in September. So we'll just, because essentially it's not an expense, like, you know, those people are not working at the church.
With the exception of super.
Exactly.
If your employee is making super and we're charging the super through to you, you can pay that because the JobKeeper scheme doesn't cover that.
Okay. Okay. And this will all sort of wash up at the end of the JobKeeper and be sort of corrected then.
Yeah, I don't think it will be a big problem if you guys wait until September, right? I mean, the super charges, I don't think we'll be that worried about that.
No, I'm more than happy to wait. I just wanted to clarify that that's the arrangement, that we shouldn't be sort of doing ongoing entries with that.
Well, it'll just be if, because not everyone will be on the JobKeeper. So if you have like Bible workers and stuff like that haven't qualified for the JobKeeper, then they would still have to. So that's really those ones that you still have to do the processing for.
So you'll just see on your K-Church statement where there's been wages. If you are seeing JobKeeper on there as well,
yes,
then just ignore them for this stage.
Yes,
and that'll be corrected later. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask the question. In my last statement, there was no wages. We've got a fella that does the cleaning. I think it's about $92 a fortnight, and that's usually on my statement every month. But this last statement, there wasn't anything on the statement. So is he still getting paid, or what's the story there?
Okay. We can look into that, John.
Okay then.
Maxine.
John Higgins is one of our members. He does the cleaning. So yeah.
Okay.
Maxine, you will write that down.
Yeah. I'm just noting that now.
Yeah.
Okay then. Thank you.
Yes. So something that I guess I would like to stress is just going back to the section of end of month processing, the GST reports. So basically, I just want to sort of stress that, you know, the supporting documents that you sent, we will check, and all we're doing is we're just simply trying to comply with the GST rules for GST processing. And I guess those are the things that I would like to mention again. We need to have a proper invoice for us to be able to refund your GST on the purchases. So, you know, there's the ABN number. We need to check that. We need to check that the person or that the supplier is registered for GST if we are going to refund you the GST. And obviously, if the correct GST amount as per the supporting document is very important. Sometimes you have supporting documents, Aldi or Coles receipts, not the whole 1/11th of the total amount will have GST. You know, only there is a small amount there for GST for GST items. So that amount is what needs to be registered on your system as GST to be collected or to be refunded. I mean, and that the supplier is registered for GST. Not everyone who has an ABN is registered for GST. Yes, and again, we only need to claim GST on proper goods. Rates and water do not have GST. That's a given. There are items such as groceries, for example, fresh foods, milk, all those sort of items, they do not have GST. But again, the supporting document will tell you the maximum GST on a particular receipt. And just for us to, you know, to be able to process this faster, it would be good if the documents are in the same order as the GST report. Even better if you can cross-reference GST reports with the documents. That's if your church is a big church and there are so many items in your GST report. Obviously, for small churches, you don't need to do this. We can easily find the supporting documents and the GST amounts on the report, so that's fine. But again, this is most for a request, I guess, kindly for bigger churches who have a big report, big GST report, and it will be easier to cross-reference. One PDF file with all the documents in order, if you can. If you can't, well, that's fine. That's that's just a request for us to do a faster processing. So yeah, so those are some I guess requests that we would like to mention again. Yeah, so that's it from me. Do you guys have another question or any other questions? Oh, by the way, somebody said to me that I had a spelling mistake. Apologies for that. Zero.
Yeah, Z.
You know, actually, a zero with C is in Spanish, and that's my native language. So what I might do is I'll just look for zero and reply with zero. There you go. Replace all. And only one replacement. There you go. Okay, so that's done. I will send you a proper. Yeah. Anyway. What else can we talk about? Does anybody have any more questions?
Yeah, just on budgeting.
Yeah, sure.
When you've got your boards, when you've got the business meetings approval for the budget, and the church passed it, what is the practice of all the churches? I don't do this, but do other churches actually apply funds to the various, say from local budget funds through across all the other funds at that time, or do you just wait till the end of the year, as I do?
I do, Bruce. At our last business meeting in November of each year, I have asked each department leader to provide what they want to do for the following year with an estimate of what they want to spend. So then I can have that prepared before the end of December. So then when I do my end of year and I roll over, I then at the beginning of January, put all of that in, and that's what they've got to spend for the year. That's it. And I don't let them have anything.
The same.
So what's in the kitty? That's it.
Well, I base that. I say to them, you can come forward with your $100 you want to spend or your $1,000 you want to spend, and once I've worked out what we need to run off with our local budget for our normal expenses, then I say, well, this is what we've got left, so I can give you 500 of that 1,000 this year, or you know, yeah, I have to work it out to what's best to make it goes around.
So just on a technical issue, Paolo, on a bookkeeping issue, that's fine if you've got the funds to put it in there, but otherwise that becomes they become assets. But if you don't, then you've got to treat them as liability, I suppose, liability accounts. Any comments?
All the fund accounts are equity accounts.
Yeah, they are, yes. Yeah. I understand that, yep.
So if you're just transferring from one fund account to another, it's just switching equity from one pocket to another.
Yep. Which I have done in the past. Yeah.
You can only do it that way if you've got the funds, enough funds in your local budget to be able to put that amount in your other funds. If you haven't, you would have to do it month to month or however.
Correct.
But
Yeah.
if you're
Otherwise,
fortunate enough to have enough funds in the first place.
It did take me quite a few years for this to work, Bruce. It wasn't successful straight up.
Right.
Yeah.
I was just wondering what you other churches are doing with that. Yep.
What we're hoping with going across to Sage is that we'll have a budget section in the system, so like a budget ledger, so you won't have to sort of use your funds you sort of move away from funds accounting and then just use the budget for that. So yeah.
Yes.
On the thing of budgets, if when a budget is presented to the board and it's accepted, the things that they've asked to do within that budget, does that mean they are then able to spend their money on those things without coming back to the board or getting reapproval for it?
That's correct.
So if they really sit down, they want to purchase this, this and this, when they go to purchase it, they don't have to come back to the board again to ask.
No.
Correct.
No, I thought so. I just wanted to correct that because somebody asked again at our board meeting the other day, and I said, no, they don't, but I wanted to re-clarify it.
Yep.
Just one thing that I'm thinking about, I've only just become a treasurer in the last few weeks, so there's a lot of this I'm learning. But I guess one thing that we did have at the conference when I worked there was what's called a delegation manual, which clearly outlines from board level to various office holder levels, what their delegated authority was to spend, within budget and so on. And I'm thinking of drafting a similar document for the local church that essentially is a policy that says, well, if it's more than a certain amount, it has to go to the board. If it's a certain amount, it can be approved by the pastor or the treasurer, or if it's below a certain amount and within budget, it can just automatically be spent by the departmental, appointed person. I think it's important just to have some sort of document like that where it's very clear to everybody, who can spend what, with or without authority.
Yeah, that's great.
When you've done that, Paul, can you send it out?
Yeah, look,
Go, Paul.
sure, look, once I've drafted it, and yeah, it can only be a written document, but it just, if there is issues down the track, you can just go back to that document and say, here it is. This is, this is what we all agree. This was approved by the board. This is the way we operate here. And then there's no sort of questions about, whoops, that person shouldn't have spent that, or if someone goes rogue, there's a document that governs it. And you could go the next step of having the departmental people, the pastor, the treasurer, sign that document just to make it clear that they have received it, they understand it, and that's what they've agreed to be governed by.
Yeah.
For our church, anything over 300, they have to get board approval. But one issue I've come across quite a bit is, for instance, they bought a big $800 TV for COVID, and it's in the person's name. It doesn't have Central Coast Community Church on it anywhere, even though they actually used the church credit card to pay for it. Also, I know somebody bought a keyboard and it was over $1,000, but it's in that person's name, and that really bothers me.
And that's the exact thing that this policy would be put in place to address.
I've been involved with an organisation where folks bought a vehicle and a forklift under their names, and when they got nasty with the organisation, they walked away with a forklift and the vehicle because they were in their names. So, but in the first place, they've been bought on behalf of that organisation. So yeah, there's a lot of nasty thinking going on with those left behind with respect to that person. So yeah, you got to be careful with that sort of thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think the document that we're talking about just provides clarity and protection for everybody. They know what's expected. They've signed up to what's expected, and it's not a big brother type thing. It's not a because we're suspicious or anything. It's just there's clarity. Everybody knows where the lines are drawn, and they're when people know where they're drawn, they're more than happy usually to live within them.
Absolutely.
I know I always ask everybody if they're purchasing something to make sure it's purchased in the name of Newcastle Multicultural.
Good one. That's good.
Yeah. That's a good point to
Even if
get
your
across.
name has to be attached to it as well, as long as the account comes to me or the thing comes with Newcastle Multicultural written on it.
Yeah. Good.
Okay.
Something that I was just thinking is, how many of you churches have debit cards or credit cards under your name, under the church's name? And because, you know, to bank reconcile a debit card, or I guess, yeah, a bank account which you have a card for and certain officers use, is probably a bit, you know, it's extra work perhaps. Something that we have been recommending is the use of a top-up card or a prepaid card for purchases. You know, could be used as a petty cash, for example. And Australia Post you can use one of the Australia Post ones, and all you do is you just sign up online, and you get this card where you just top it up, say for $500 or $1,000, and it can be used as a petty cash facility. So use the officer can just have the card and go and spend, buy the items for a particular project at the church, come back with the receipts, and you can just simply record that expenditure in tours, and then just top the card up to the limit or the float.
And that would work well with budgeting.
That as well. It's a good mechanism of, you know, for that as well, for that purpose.
One thing to also note with that is with a debit card, there's no authority on it. Like when you give it someone a debit card, they will have access to whatever is that account, the account that whatever that card is connected to. But having a top-up card, you would then still have your checks and balances where the top-up of that card is signed off by minimum 2 people to have the bank transfer to top that up. So that also puts in a bit more of a sort of a safeguard in there as well. So there's not just the one person spending money from an account.
Yes.
That's right.
We did use multicultural. At Multicultural, we did use a top-up card for Pathfinder Camporee a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
When the Camporee was over, we got rid of the card because it was a one-off for that specific purpose,
yes,
where it was easier for them to get their petrol, to get their food when they were away. They had actually raised their own money, so the money that was being topped into it each time was coming from the Pathfinder Fund anyway. But yes, it was that worked quite well for there. But we did have a credit card once, and I got rid of it. It was too big a hassle. The specific purpose, the top-up card was handy.
Yes.
It does have to be in a person's name. Like we have one for live streaming, but like was just said, there are checks and balances where the receipts, the payments have got to be authorised by another person.
For example, we as a conference, we use this kind of idea, this top-up card for our petty cash. What is our amount, Keaton? Is it 500 or?
It was 1,000. We've just put it up a bit higher.
Yeah, okay, 1,000. So what happens is I work for the conference, for example. I need to go and buy toilet paper or something, and I come to the office, to Treasury, and say, look, I'm going to buy this and that, and it has been approved by my department, my supervisor, and then there is a register where I put, okay, so on this date, in that time, I took the card, and I went in. When I come back with the purchases, a return with the receipts, or even the receipts can be uploaded online, right, Keaton? Or
yeah, you can email them.
Yeah, email them, and then come back and also write in the register what time and the date I came back with the card. So that way we keep a track of who has been using the card for how long.
That's a great idea.
And then what happens is at the end of the month or every so often, we record that expenditure when we are going to top up that amount in the card again, so that it's ready and fresh to use. And we record the expenditure then. So
the register helps us because if there's anything that we weren't expecting to see on their transaction history, you know, something we don't have a receipt for, we can look up and see who had the card at that time. And
that way we got rid of cash. So we don't, it's petty cash, but it's not cash anymore. It's just an online thing. And the risk is only up to, say, you know, Keaton just said a bit more than $1,000. It depends on your organization. So yeah, that's a good idea, and we wanted to mention. If you are interested in it, give us a call. We can step you through the process of getting that card. The one that we have been recommending is Australia Post. Recently, I have done that for one of the churches, and they're happy. They haven't said anything else, so they're happy with that. They're using that system. So
I've got a question about that.
Yes.
Paula.
Yes.
My brain is saying what I could do is I could open an account within our local church account, which isn't a Westpac bank, by the way,
Yes.
it's a credit union. I could open an account in that institution that had no funds in that account, or $1 or something in that
Yes.
account.
Mm-hmm.
And then we could transfer money into that account and have a debit card attached to that account. And so the process of clearing the funds then becomes who has the authority to transfer, not who's actually physically got hold of the card at any given moment. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes, yes. Yeah, but that means you have another bank account to reconcile every month.
Yeah, in our case, we probably wouldn't use it often enough to make it even worth starting the process. But I could see that being a way around it if we felt we had the need to.
Yeah, I guess it can be used. It can have, you know, it has the same idea, but again, that means you have another bank account to reconcile, and what you're trying to do is reduce the amount of tasks or the amount of accounts to be reconciled every month.
Oh, I like the straight.
Whereas for this petty cash that I'm talking about is when you first establish the card, say 500, the first entry is going to be, you know, you are going to create an asset. You know, the petty cash is an asset. You go debit petty cash load and go, credit CMF, for example. So that's when you first establish this system or this little petty cash. And then next month you have somebody who comes in and borrows the card, goes and buys, say, for example, for $200. So the card that is available for use is only 300, but you have receipts for 200. So what you do, that 200 needs to be topped up. And then that's when you just simply do a transfer of funds to that card from CMF. You can even do it via express payment entry on TORS, assuming that you have created a supplier with this BSBN account number. You can use BSBN account number for these cards, and then you will record the expenditure. Then record the expenditure, and cash goes out to top up that. And you don't need to do any bank reconciliations except just the CMF account where you're transferring the funds 200.
We've got a couple of our members that need to get, like our cleaner, he goes and gets all his supplies. He might go to 2 or 3 or even 4 different suppliers.
Yeah.
And he pays all that himself on his credit card.
Mm-hmm.
Then he brings all the receipts to me. we add it all up, and then I get a check countersigned by one of my assistants, and we give him the check. So that saves a lot of time if it can be done. Some people would, and there's a couple of our members that do that. They pay for it, and then I give them a check and receive the receipts.
Yeah,
most of ours do it that way.
Reimbursement,
we
yeah,
just
sorry.
transfer it. Most of ours do it that way, but we actually even transfer it electronically from CMF into their accounts.
Right.
After they've given receipts.
Yeah, yeah.
That's how most of our things are done.
Yeah.
If you're happy with the way, yeah.
We don't like checks at work. We get next to no checks. We'd be lucky at sanitarium. We'd be lucky if we got a check every 5 months. We try and get away from them as much as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I still like the check, countersigned. You know where you stand, where the money's going, and we've got an account with the ANZ Bank. I think the church has been with them for over 30 years, and it doesn't cost us 1 cent for the check account. So when I get accounts in too, I can write the check out, and usually I can go to one of the banks in town and put the check straight into the bank and pay it that way. So that's a help.
Yeah, I mean, if you're happy with the current system, this is a recommendation for your petty cash or your expenditure, just small amount expenditure. Then feel free to ask more questions, or yeah.
We've found that this petty cash system has arisen out of a need from some churches. So some churches have members that with pockets deep enough to be able to handle some church expenditure on their, out of their own pocket and wait for a reimbursement. And other church members we've found that do a lot of work for the church are not in a financial position to be able to bear that burden and need to spend church money because they don't have their own money to spend. And so that's why, these systems sort of came about in the first place. So it's really just dependent on what the individual church needs, whether you've got members that are sort of needing this or whether you don't. It's really up to you and as the local church treasurer to decide whether or not to implement a system like that.
But again, if you have any questions, we're happy to help you out in the process. There is a question here on in regards of the procurement survey. It says here whether the CCLI charges, is that by church or by conference wide? CCLI. I believe there is a big bill that we receive, right, Keaton? It's once a year for CCLI for all the churches, correct?
Yeah.
And then we own charge them. This is for the, if I'm not mistaken, this is a charge for the copyrights for the music that we sing.
Yep.
So I have noticed also that some churches have, well, they might not be on that list that I'm talking about, on this big charge that comes into us and then we own charge. They pay on their own name.
Yeah, there's different licenses. So the one we get for every church is, I'm not sure exactly. I think it's the ability to be able to present the words on the screen and to reproduce the music. But there are different licenses. For example, there's one that we as a conference need to get for Big Camp, and I think other churches would get it from time to time as well, which is a performance license. And then there's I think there's a few other licenses as well, but Jody Bird at the conference office is the one who organizes that group license that we get for the music reproduction. She knows a bit more about the different licenses, but I think when you see churches getting their own CCLI, it's usually because it's a different license to the one that we get as a group for the conference.
Yeah, that's correct, Keaton. I used to work with Jody on that when I was at the conference, and you're correct that the big bulk one is for putting words on the screen. And yeah, there was a significant saving that was made possible by having that facilitated through the conference rather than through each individual church. And you're also correct in saying that if a church wants to do a performance or a live stream or something like that, there is a specific license they need to pay for to allow them to do that.
Ours is $800 odd a year, and my understanding is every song that's sung, it has to have the CCLI number recorded back to them.
Yeah,
correct.
It should be on the screen when the words are projected onto the screen.
There you go.
I think it's also dependent on the membership.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
you're
it
right.
is.
Yep.
Thank you. Very good. Yes. So that's it. Does anybody have any other questions?
I just say thanks for the top-up card idea, because we're just getting rid of petty cash at sanitarium. So I'll suggest that to them.
So the one that the conference used is through Universal Gift Card. It's a company that does this, universalgiftcard.com. I think, is it .com.au, Kito, or .com?
I'm not sure. I think it's .com.
Yeah, something like that. But the ones that we have been recommending for churches is Australia Post. It's easier to sign up, easier and just straightforward. Whereas for Universal, it's a bit more complex. But yeah, it fits our needs as a conference-wide, so as a conference office. Yes. Again, if you have any questions on that, let us know and we can help you trying to see whether it actually fits for you.
Just a final comment on that.
Yes.
Yeah, the last time I was a treasurer was about 25 years ago, and at that time it was very much, the local church members spent the money, they put their receipt into the treasurer wrote a check, they deposited the check, and the whole turnaround process could sometimes take 3 or 4 weeks, from the spending of the money to getting it back into their account. This generation, particularly if you want your young people involved in church, this generation are very much used to tap and go.
Yes.
And so they expect that if they do a transaction, it happens instantly, it comes out of some account. And so I guess they're just used to that. So I think it's going to become increasingly common in local churches that, this ease of transacting will be demanded. And I think it's just wise to provide that. And yeah, I think there's a couple of solutions, but probably the one you're suggesting with the top-up card is probably the simplest and best. But I think it's a necessary part of engaging our younger generation.
That's a great point, Paul.
Yeah, that's a good point.
We're noticing that getting people onto e-giving has been a challenge at both ends of the spectrum. There are your older generation that have never used technology for that sort of thing, and they have resistance to e-giving for that particular reason. And then after speaking to the pastor at College Church a couple of weeks ago, they have a lot of students won't get onto e-giving because it's too slow. They use some other app on their phone that I'd never heard of, and so yeah, we've got a wide spectrum of people in our churches, and it's our job to try and cater as best we can to all of them.
Yeah, that's it.
Good point. Thanks, Paul, for adding that. Yes, back to Owen, perhaps, if nobody else has any questions.
No. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
All right, Owen, last words or?
Yeah, well, thank you everyone for joining us on a Sunday afternoon. It's great to touch base with everyone throughout the year, and I think this mode of communicating and getting together is probably going to be one we're going to be using more going forward. So yeah, we can get together a bit more often and discuss things that are sort of affecting each of you at your local churches. So thank you very much for all that you're doing.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's much appreciated.
Soren.
So yeah, I hope you all have a lovely afternoon, and we'll probably if Doug, would you mind finishing us off with prayer?
Yeah, I can do that. Yes.
Thank you.
Lord, we just thank you so much that we can be part of your work in this field. And Lord, as we move forward into new technology and into new ways of doing things, help us to be able to adapt to that, so that we may be powerful in spreading the gospel in our areas and being able to support that type of work. Lord, we just ask for a blessing on all those who've joined this meeting today, and may their churches be blessed and may they do their job well, is my prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.